A pregnant taxi was transporting an 80-year-old woman to a nursing home. However, when the old woman died and her will was read, everyone was surprised. Susanna, a taxi driver from the city, felt a wave of anxiety. After all, no one likes to waste time and fuel on fake routes, especially when you have to go to the outskirts of the city. She honked the horn a few times and drummed on the steering wheel, showing her nervousness. She was just about to leave when the door to the house opened and an old, thin and wrinkled lady, at least 80 years old, appeared. She was dressed in modest clothes, an old coat and a light scarf, dragging a large suitcase behind her. The old woman approached, and Susanna wasted no time getting out of the taxi to help her with her luggage. Before we continue with the story, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to us. Also, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We're asking this because... "Sorry I'm late," the lady said in a trembling voice. "I got lost in time." Susanna smiled politely. "No problem. Everything's all right, and let's get in. I will use GPS to avoid traffic jams and arrive faster." The old lady asked, "Dear, could we drive through the city center? I haven't left the house in years, and I would like to see how things have changed." Despite the unexpected request, Susanna decided to fulfill her passenger's wish. Mrs. Avila offered to pay extra to change the route. "By the way, my name is Mrs. Avila. What's your name?" she asked. "My name is Susanna." "I am pleased to meet you. Don't worry about the extra fee. Driving through the center is not a problem. It will be a pleasant walk." The two set off, and Mrs. Avila marveled at the changes in the city through the window. "Look, modern buildings," she exclaimed. "There used to be a dress shop here, and now there is a restaurant. And that building that looks like a Christmas tree? How many floors does it have?" Susanna explained. "This is a new shopping center with a cinema, cafe, and many attractions for children." The old woman continued her memories. "My husband Sylvester and I loved walking these streets in the evenings, especially near this park. There was a dance stage there in the summer. It was so wonderful. I worked in court and Sylvester was a math teacher. We built our house together. But everything changed when our daughter Soledad was born. After her birth, she left us due to unhappy love and disappeared." Susanna asked gently about Soledad, since that was her mother's name. Mrs. Avila wiped a tear and said, "It is a long story. She just left and we never saw her again." "Look at this church, how beautiful it is." Mrs. Avila, always curious, turned to Susanna and asked, "How did a young woman like you decide to become a taxi driver? It's not common to see so many women in this profession. You're the first one I see here." Susanna, with a relaxed gesture, told her story. "Mrs. Avila, life is like that. I was orphaned very young. My mother died when I was 8 years old. Then I fell in love, got pregnant, and Valentin abandoned me. He escaped from responsibility. Today I am here, pregnant and alone. I have always loved cars. I learned to drive at a very young age. I love what I do and I earn my own money." Mrs. Avila expressed her sympathy. "Not only are you a taxi driver, but you are also a future single mother. What a difficult situation. Do you have someone to help you with your baby?" Susanna smiled slightly. "No, I'm used to coping on my own. I have been saving for a child in childbirth for a long time. My job supports me well." When they arrived, Susanna saw a large gray building surrounded by a high wall. The name on the door indicated it was a nursing home. Susanna felt her heart sink as she realized that a lonely and sick old woman would live there. She turned off the engine, helped Mrs. Avila out of the car, and carried her suitcase to the door. The old woman said with sadness in her voice, "This is my final place. I won't be here long. I'm very sick and I'll leave this world soon. Take care of yourself and your child. Never let it get away from you." Susanna, touched, hugged Mrs. Avila and asked if she could visit her sometime. The old woman, reconciled with her fate, replied, "Don't worry, girl. You have your own problems that are more important now. Go now." When she tried to pay, Susanna refused. "No, please keep your money to yourself. Look after yourself." Then she quickly drove away, trying to hold back her sadness. That evening, despite a quick dinner and a hot bath, Susanna couldn't fall asleep. The image of the lonely and abandoned Mrs. Avila haunted her mind. How is it possible that a daughter can forget her mother like that, she thought, recalling her difficult childhood. With tears in her eyes, Susanna reflected on the difficult realities of life. Her childhood was marked by difficulties and sorrows. Her mother, Soledad, was the only source of love and joy in her life. She worked non-stop as a cleaner at a motel down the road. Despite being extremely tired, she always found a way to show her love for her daughter by buying her sweets and toys secretly from her husband. Susanna's stepfather, Camilo, was a dark figure in the house. He drank too much, was cruel, and physically abused Susana, often beating and insulting her. Even though Soledad wanted to protect her daughter, she felt powerless. Susana repeatedly begged her mother to leave her stepfather, but Soledad, even though she was aware of his evil, felt trapped in this hopeless relationship. When Soledad died suddenly of a heart attack, Susana's life collapsed. Camilo, wanting to get rid of his stepdaughter, became even more brutal. Susana lived in constant fear, hiding to avoid his attacks. The situation became unbearable as Camilo insulted and abused her more and more often. Rescue came when concerned neighbors called Child Protective Services. Susana ended up in an orphanage. Camilo finally achieved his goal by getting rid of his stepdaughter. For Susana, under the roof of the orphanage, a new chapter in her life was beginning, away from her past abuses. At the orphanage, Susana faced challenges that shaped her into a strong and resilient young woman. She often had to defend herself, which sometimes resulted in unfair punishments. Over time, she gained the respect of all the children living there, who introduced her to the world of cars, teaching her about spare parts and even how to rebuild engines. Susana loved spending time with the old moped that the caretaker, Mr. Rios, let her use for fun. Her look reflected her strong spirit: short hair, worn sneakers, and a leather jacket. Still, her face revealed a delicate beauty with deep brown eyes, full lips, and adorable dimples. Her smile was captivating, and many admired her courage and mechanical skills. When she learned about her stepfather's death from cirrhosis of the liver caused by alcohol abuse, Susana felt no empathy. On the contrary, she felt relieved. She believed his destructive behavior contributed to the untimely death of her mother, who had endured years of strain and stress. After leaving the orphanage, Susana began a new phase in her life. This time in a small apartment in an old building. The place was far from ideal, with damaged walls, cockroaches, torn wallpaper, and ruined furniture. Susana, determined and resilient, didn't let it get the better of her. She refinished the wallpaper, sprayed the area with insect repellent, and repaired what she could. Thanks to great effort and the help of friends, the apartment became an acceptable home. Due to her passion for cars, Susana quickly passed her driving test and received her license. Determined to find a job, she initially encountered difficulties due to her lack of experience. Text here. Therefore, she decided to try her luck as a taxi driver, a profession that, according to rumors, offered good wages and tips, but also required a lot of dedication and considerable knowledge of the city streets. When she arrived at the taxi station to apply, Susana was greeted with some skepticism by Mr. Pineda, the owner. He doubted the skills of the young girl with short hair, but he offered her a challenge, an impromptu test of driving skills. The other drivers built an obstacle course out of tires that ended in a narrow entrance to the garage, challenging Susan to complete 3 laps around the twisting course and park backwards in the garage in less than 5 minutes. Additionally, she had to use a car with a manual transmission. An audience of taxi drivers gathered, many doubting that Susana could overcome the challenge. The route was complex, requiring skill and precision in maneuvering with minimal margin for error. To everyone's surprise, Susana jumped into the old Ford without hesitation, smiled, and did everything perfectly without making a single mistake. The men were amazed, and even Mr. Pineda was surprised, scratching his head. He said, "Good, you did it right. A deal is a deal. I'll hire you, but we don't have many new cars here. As a beginner, you will get an old car, but you can use it however you want. But if it breaks, the repair is on your bill. Here, drivers can handle the car themselves because they know the mechanics. We have a mechanic, but he can't handle everything. I'm waiting for you on Monday at 8 a.m. for your first day, but I doubt you'll last long here. We've never had women working with us here." At first, the other drivers decided to be strict with Susana. She was given only the most difficult courses, such as driving drunk people home after a night of partying or accompanying impatient ladies on an afternoon shopping spree in the city center. They often sent her to remote places in the middle of the night. Everyone thought she would give up and quit her job soon. However, nothing like that happened. Susana seemed to enjoy her job even more. The old car was always causing problems, but she never gave up, always rolling up her sleeves and tinkering with the engine herself, often working overtime even though she received little credit for it. Over time, she gained the respect of her colleagues, who began to support her. If there were any provocations, it was only for fun. Susana learned not to bring problems home. This is how she worked as a taxi driver for 3 years, never getting tired. When she was still a taxi driver 2.5 years ago, her friends decided to surprise her for her birthday and invited her to a motorcycle meeting. They knew she would like it because hearing the roar of the engines was better for her than any gift. Susanna was delighted with what she saw. Powerful motorcycles and bearded men in leather jackets and black jeans who looked like Vikings. That was the day she met Valentine, who also came to attend the event. The two immediately liked each other and became friends. It was obvious that Susanna was interested in Valentine, a muscular and confident man, a volleyball coach who loved motorcycles. Valentine also became interested in Susanna, especially when she talked about the car maneuvers she did when she was hired as a taxi driver. They quickly began dating more often and soon began to have an intense and passionate affair. At first, Susanna didn't mind that Valentine wasn't talking about a serious relationship. They enjoyed love and life to the fullest. Why rush? They could rent a motorcycle and ride around the city all night, feeling the wind on their faces. Susanna has always loved freedom, speed, and adrenaline. Additionally, they made passionate and intense love, as if each meeting was the last. Everything changed when Susanna discovered she was pregnant. Valentine didn't even bother to talk about it. He just disappeared, stopped answering his phone, and pretended he didn't know her when they were dating. Soon there were rumors that he had found another rich girl. Susanna decided to move on with her life, pregnant and single. When Susanna saw the father of her child kissing his new girlfriend in public, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. A clear signal that their relationship is definitely over. She felt hurt and feared what the future would hold as a single mother. She even thought about doing something stupid. But she remembered her difficult childhood, how her mother fended for herself, and thought, why start this and make this child suffer too? She even planned to terminate her pregnancy at the clinic, but on the eve of the procedure, something happened that changed the course of her story. Susanna carried a passenger who looked like a gypsy with her colorful scarf and long dress. When the woman got out of the car, she grabbed Susanna's hand, looked deep into her eyes and said, "Everything will be fine, dear. Don't worry so much. You will have a son and then a daughter. May happiness not abandon you." The woman left and Susanna stood stunned, not knowing what to do. She didn't believe in such things, but it moved her. She decided not to go to the clinic and opted for single motherhood, rejecting the need for a partner like Valentine or a stepfather, which she herself had experienced. After that, everything seemed easier. She had a goal, to earn as much money as possible to take care of the child until she could send him to kindergarten. She worked at full capacity every day. The physical exhaustion was noticeable. Susanna did not develop serious medical conditions such as thrombosis, but she lived with back pain and swollen legs due to sitting behind the wheel for long periods of time. She often recalled Mrs. Avila, especially the conversation they had while driving through downtown. These memories mysteriously intensified after her encounter with the gypsy, making her think more and more about the lonely old woman in the nursing home. Thinking about it, she made a firm decision. I'll visit her. It doesn't cost anything and she will find it refreshing. She definitely feels lonely. Susanna knew exactly what it was like. It is difficult to live in places like orphanages or nursing homes. Her heart ached at the thought of living in such places again, even if Mrs. Avila was well taken care of there. The next day, Susanna found time to buy a bouquet of flowers and some fruit. Then she went to visit her old friend. Mrs. Avila was so happy that she cried. She hugged Susanna like a family member and said, "Thank you, Susanna. You have a heart of gold. You remembered the old woman. It's so sad to be alone here. I felt better at home, but it's not the same here. My health is poor. I can't even eat well. My hands shake all day. I can't hold things steady anymore." They talked for a while at the beginning of the afternoon, until Susanna had to go back to work. Mrs. Avila, all happy, did not let the bouquet out of her hands for a moment and dreamed by the window until dawn. After this visit, Susanna began to visit Mrs. Avila almost every day, even if only for a short time. On weekends, they could spend half the day together. Text here. It was a joyful time for both of them, full of conversation and companionship. One day, Susanna asked Mrs. Avila for advice on taking care of her baby. The old lady started talking about her life. "You remind me of my daughter, Soledad. I loved her so much. She was intelligent, studious, and we had great hopes for her future until Renee, that terrible foreigner, came along and changed her way of thinking." The old woman became thoughtful and continued. "He was married. Soledad gave in to her crazy passion and became pregnant. My husband became furious, saying that she had brought disgrace to the family. Renee denied everything and disappeared, saying he didn't even know if the child was his. Soledad was more angry at us for following him than at him for running away. She went looking for him, and we haven't heard anything since. To this day, I don't know how he is or where he is. I regret arguing with her. I should have accepted them both. In time, everything would be forgotten. She wasn't the first to go through this, and she won't be the last. Susanna, never feel sorry for this child. Love them, take care of them. The most important thing is that you are together. When you grow up, someone will take care of you in your old age. 3 months later, on her day off, Susanna was in the kitchen from early morning. She wasn't a good cook, but she tried not to burn the steaks. She wanted to bring home-cooked food to Mrs. Avila. Suddenly the phone rang. Susana Guerra, I'm listening. This is the secretary from the nursing home. Miss Avila gave us your number yesterday. She suddenly felt bad and unfortunately died at night. Our condolences. Do you know who will take care of the funeral? Does he have any family? Susanna hung up the phone without a word. She cried for a long time, feeling that she had lost a family member. Without a second thought, she used the money she had saved for the birth to pay for Mrs. Avila's funeral. While organizing her friend's belongings in a nursing home, she was particularly touched when she saw that Mrs. Avila had kept the dried flowers from her bouquet in a prayer book. To stop being so sad, Susanna decided to focus on work and drove non-stop until Mr. Puneta told her that she should take maternity leave. Susanna, are you crazy? Do you want to give birth here at work? Take a vacation, or I'll deliver the baby myself. Don't worry, your place here is secure when you return. We need people like you. The next day, Susanna started her maternity leave. That same day, the city's notary, a middle-aged man with a briefcase, unexpectedly appeared at her apartment. What he said shocked the girl. Mrs. Avila made a will in which you bequeathed your house. He handed me the letter for personal delivery. Here are the keys and documents. Now the house is yours. Congratulations. I have to go. If you have any problems, please go to the office. Goodbye. Susanna, still shocked, sat on the sofa, opened the letter, and trembling began to read, Dear Susanna, you have become a very close person to me. Your visits were very important to me. It's good to know someone still cares. Thank you for your heart, presence, in all conversations. You warmed my soul, which was cold from loneliness. The least I can do to thank you is to leave you my house as a symbol of my gratitude. I hope you won't sell it, but renovate it and live in it with your child. The house has a piece of my soul. If you light the fireplace in autumn, pay attention. Goodbye, dear. Big hug. Take care of yourself and baby. With love, Mrs. Avila. Susanna cried quietly, remembering her old friend's dry hands and nostalgic eyes. Despite her advanced pregnancy, she decided to move into Mrs. Avila's house and slowly tidy it up. She felt trapped in the small apartment. She knew that the child would be happier in a house with a garden. She started packing and moving her things to the new house. Susanna was scared of the future, with no extra money and many expenses ahead of her. She didn't know how she would cope, but in order not to think too much, she started general cleaning. She organized wardrobes and shelves in rhythm. At this point, she found an old record player with some records and was enjoying listening to Bach and Beethoven. In the clothes closet, Mrs. Avila found a beautiful lace turquoise dress. Susanna imagined that it belonged to Soledad, Mrs. Avila's daughter, who had run away from the same house. Mrs. Avila probably kept the dress as a souvenir of her daughter throughout her life. The house was spacious and full of old-fashioned charm. It was obvious that Mrs. Avila's husband had good taste in decoration. Everything was high quality and well made, just needed a bit of renovation due to the passage of time. When Susanna was preparing one of the rooms for a baby, Damian, a colleague from work and also a taxi driver, offered to help. They became friends while ferrying passengers around the city. Damian, who was divorced 4 years ago when his wife left him for someone else, was in no rush to return home and spent a lot of time helping Susanna. She also helped him repair cars, although she could not do heavy work due to her pregnancy. Every day they exchanged ideas that lasted until late at night. Damian watched Susanna, even with her big belly, unrolling wallpapers and climbing ladders, always full of energy and with a smile on her face. That day she wore a bandana and a striped blouse, looking funny and determined at the same time. Damian did not hide his admiration. Susanna, how do you do it? Where do you get so much energy? My ex-wife was tired just shopping, and here you are pregnant, renovating the house. You are amazing. He had been in love with Susanna for a long time, ever since the day he saw her driving the old Ford on a test drive. He liked her honesty, dedication, hard work, and charisma. She was unlike anyone he knew. Aware of Susanna's situation, pregnant and abandoned by her boyfriend, he decided not to reveal his feelings. He knew this wasn't the right time and she might not be ready to understand his intentions. He chose to be the best friend she needed, hoping that time would bring the best for both of them. Then she found something. While trying to remove the item, it fell to the floor, covered in dust and soot. The young woman began sneezing constantly. However, curiosity was stronger, and she quickly unpacked the mysterious package, curious about what was hidden there. In front of Susanna was a box full of jewelry, diamond chains, bracelets, precious stones, and coins. She exclaimed in surprise. Then she found something. While trying to remove the item, it fell to the floor, covered in dust and soot. The young woman began sneezing constantly. However, curiosity was stronger, and she quickly unpacked the mysterious package, curious about what was hidden there. In front of Susanna was a box full of jewelry, diamond chains, bracelets, precious stones, and coins. She exclaimed in surprise. Wow, that's a real fortune. Is this what Mrs. Avila mentioned in her letter about the fireplace? How could I not have noticed this before? At the bottom of the chest, in a cellophane bag, she found old black and white photos. Susanna looked at them carefully. Mrs. Avila was there, and probably her husband. And that other person? She couldn't be anyone other than Soledad, her mother. How is this possible? Mrs. Avila is my grandmother, and my mother is the daughter she spoke so much about. Incredible. Damian entered the room and stopped, scared. Susanna sat on the floor, dirty and crying, holding the photos over the jewelry chest. Damian ran to her, trying to help. Susanna, are you okay? Why did you go into the fireplace alone? You can't just sit on the cold floor. What happened? Where did all this come from? Susanna could barely speak, still in shock. My mother. This is my mother, do you understand? Mrs. Avila, whom I cared for until her death, was my grandmother. That's what I discovered. Damian was really confused to see Susanna like this. He had never seen her like this before. Concerned, thinking he might be delirious due to pregnancy or a blow to the head, he went to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water. Take this, drink this, and calm down. Then you'll tell me everything in detail, otherwise I'll think you're crazy. After drinking the water, Susanna calmed down a bit and told Damian the whole story. He was amazed. Wow, nice story. Like from a soap opera. So you're rich now? Congratulations. What are you going to do with this money? Sell the house? Susanna shook her head. Under no circumstances. This is my family's nest. This is where my roots are. My grandparents lived here. My mother grew up here. My grandfather built it all. I want to restore it, but keep it as it always was. I'm going to live here, and then my children will too. I also want to translate. What do you think about this story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion really matters to me. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the channel. It would help me out a lot. But that's not all. I have something else to share with you, so click on the video that's popping up on your screen right now. I'll be waiting for you there.